Okay, let's go over my solution. I know it's probably not the shortest solution, but I think it's very readable and everyone will actually get it. Okay, so first of all, I selected all the text inputs and all the radio inputs into their variables because we already know checking for values in text inputs are different than radio, right? Then I also selected the name field, this input, and the job field because I know at the end, right, if they refresh by accident, we need to select this field and then fill in the value. So I did that already. Okay, so now what? Well, we need to put event listeners on each of these text inputs, right? So we can do a for const input of all, let's put all text inputs. Wow. And then what? So input dot on input. Okay. And on input, once again, means this function we're about to define will run every time the user types each character in either the name or the job field. So function, actually I will name this function. Let's call it handle text inputs. And then we're gonna define that function here. Function handle text inputs. We'll take in an event object. Okay, now, how can we differentiate if they're either typing in the name field or in the job field? Well, if we look in HTML, right, we can do it by type or ID, but I want to incorporate what we learned earlier in the DOM unit, and that way we can look at its previous sibling, this label right here, and look for the text content, okay? And you can also look for the for attribute as well. You should look that up. Okay, so we can do if e.target, and again, e.target is this element right here. If e.target dot previous sibling element, actually previous element sibling, my bad, dot text content dot includes the word name, what's gonna happen? Well, we're gonna call session storage, call set item method, and let's just name this username. And what's the value? It's gonna be e.target.value. Okay, so if it has the word name in the sibling, it's the name field. Else, since we only have two, it's gonna be the job field. So we can just copy this. I would change this to user job, and we can still keep e.target.value. Because remember, once they click on this field in order to fill it out, their e.target will be that field. And if they click here, the e.target will change. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay? Okay, now how do we load all of this onto a page? Well, we already talked about document.body.onload is equal to, let's define this function. Okay. And then we're gonna check if session storage dot length is greater than 1, because remember, at least in Google Chrome, your session storage will always have one default value, so its length will be 1. We're checking if the user had already refreshed, because if they did, it would be greater than 1, right? So then we would select the name field, select its value, and we're gonna set its value equal to the return value we get from storage.getItem. And then what item are we getting? We're getting this username right here. So that means we can do the same for job field, right? And just change this to job. Okay, let's see if it will work. This was previously saved, so if I typed in a random and I refresh, oh, they have the same value because I forgot to change this to user job. All right, let's refresh, try everything again. Name Phil, job is teacher, the counter is going. I refresh, it's still here. Okay, all right, so we just handle all of our text inputs. Let's look at how we can handle our radio input. All right, now that we handled the text inputs, let's handle our radio inputs. So let's take a look. we put all of the text ones with an on input. Let's do the same for all the radio ones. So const, I'll change this to radio input of all radio inputs. And then right here, we can put radio input instead of on input, since we already use it, and we can actually use on change. I'll use on change for this one. Okay. And instead of handle text inputs, let's do handle radio inputs. Okay. And then let's define that function right here. Function handle radio inputs takes in one event object. Okay. So what's going to happen here? Well, remember all radio input elements have a dot checked, but we don't know which one's checked. So we have to loop through all of them. And instead of using my favorite for of loop, I'm actually going to have to use a regular for loop here. And that's because I need the index. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do for let I equal to 0. Oops. Let's make this look nicer. Can't type today with this new keyboard. I less than all radio inputs dot length I plus plus, and then what are we going to check for every time that we loop through these? Well, we're going to check if all radio inputs at I, and this should be I, if all radio inputs at I got checked, right? So each one that we loop through, we're going to see if it's checked property returns truthy or true, right? And if it does return truthy, what should we do? Well, we should session storage that set item it. Now, what are we setting this item? What's the key? Well, actually, I won't even bother with the value. I will set the index. Okay, and the index is just I. Okay. Now, I know there's several other ways you can do this, but to me, I think this is the best way. And then under document.body.onload, you can just solve this with one line. Look. So you take all radio inputs, right? And remember, body.onload only runs if the page has been refreshed. Okay, so if the page has been refreshed and session storage is greater than 1, that means they have chosen the radio input already. Okay, so that means we just want to know what's the index that they chose. How do we know the index? Well, we know the index by session storage dot get item. And what are we getting? We're getting the index that we just set right here. Okay, and this will return a string. Okay, and then our radio inputs is array like. So we're taking that array and we're getting the index that we want from session storage. Okay, so we have that whole element selected here. Then we're going to get its checked property and we're going to set it to true. All right, now's the ultimate test. I select this first one, the counter is going. I refresh, the first one is still selected. Now I chose the third one, counter is going, refresh, third one selected. Change to the first one, refresh, still selected. Delete everything. Try again, Philip, lamb, non-capitalized, choose the second one, refresh. Everything's still saved. All right. I hope that wasn't too hard for you. And I know there's so many different answers. And I know a few of you probably solved it way better than I did. Okay. All right. Thank you. And let's move on.